Hi class, in this video we are going to start with motives for conformity. There are two types of social influence that will get you to conform. One is informative and one is normative. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you a conformity video and what I want you to think about, because afterwards I'll define these and we'll give examples. What I want you to think about is why did the people conform? Why were they conforming to what everyone else in the room was doing? So watch that video now.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
For a noon appointment.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes.
Great,
thanks so much.
Why do you stand
Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs.
And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily conformity affects the way you act is that similar forces are subconsciously shaping the way you think right now.
And so, pardon me, the two types of reasons people conform. The informative is when you become convinced in the face of the unanimous majority that your own opinion is wrong for some reason. So you conform because you think they know something you don't, they have information you don't have. You think they're right, and you want to do the right thing. If it's normative, you go along with the crowd while inwardly believing your initial judgments are correct. You want to look normal. You don't want to stand out and look weird. And so, for example, in that video, it is more of, it's a little bit of both. It is informative for the woman who, because then when everyone was gone, she kept doing it. So she assumed this is what you have to do. That's going to be informative. If she had, there's probably some people there that were doing it for normative reasons. They just didn't want to look weird. But the fact that she continued it even when they're gone is a sign it's informative. Because if it's normative social influence, that's not necessarily the case. So my question for you is, out of these two types, informative and normative, which one lasts longer? Informative is going to last longer. Informative social influence, because you think what they're doing is right, you're going to keep doing it when you're in that same situation again. Like that woman continuing to do it even when everyone else was gone. Or, for example, another example of informative social influence, the first time you went to GLAR your first year, and you don't know what to do. Like, do people find a table first and leave their stuff? Or do they, go get silverware? Where do you sit? Are there certain sections you don't sit in? Like, you don't want to be embarrassed and sit at a table that happens to be all professors. You don't know. And so what did you do that first time you went there? You looked around to see what other people were doing, and then you copied what you saw them do. That was informative social influence. And so the next time you go to GLAR, what are you going to do? You're going to do that same thing again because you think this is the right way to do it. Normative social influence, when the people that you're conforming to are gone, you're going to stop doing it because you don't think they're right. You just didn't want to look weird. So informative lasts longer. The next thing we're going to talk about is factors that increase and decrease conformity. And there are a lot here, by the way. So we are going to go over all of these. The first one, prestige and the prevalence of the models. For this, you are going to conform to people whose behavior provides the most reliable information. So if you think, so with prestige, this would be if you, copy a influencer that you see online, or you do something that a celebrity you like does. That's the prestige part. Prevalence is going to be something like, if you are deciding which restaurant you want to eat at, and so you look at the reviews online. If a place has, a 4.9 out of 5, you're more likely to go with it. If their rating is like a 3 out of 5, you're less likely to. It seems the prevalent opinion is this is a good place to eat, so you're going to copy that behavior. You're going to go eat there as well. Or, if you're looking at reviews on like Amazon or something, that is going to be what you go for. For unanimity, this is when, if it's a unanimous thing, if there's nobody who's not conforming, that is going to be more important for you. So if you have just one person who doesn't conform, conformity rates for others plummets to basically 0. So if you're in a group and they're trying to make a decision and everyone agrees with it, you're not going to say, wait, I don't agree, wait, I think we should change this. You're more likely to go along with it if it's a unanimous decision. If at least one other person is willing to say, I don't agree, then you are significantly more likely to say, I don't agree either. Commitment, conformity to group pressure can also be lowered if you induce a person to make some sort of commitment about their initial decision. So, for example, if you have to privately say if you have to say what you think, and then the group's going to discuss it, because you said what you think first, you're more likely to stick with your decision. If you've made a commitment to what you think, you're less likely to conform, to change, to match the group because of that commitment. In an experiment done by Deutsch and Gerard, what they found was that participants who didn't have to make a commitment first, 25% of them conformed. But for the ones who did have to make a commitment, only 6% conformed. So 25 down to 6 just by having them make that commitment first. For accountability, if you have to justify your decision to the group at the end, you are more likely to conform, especially if the emphasis is on group harmony. So the experiment connected with this that was done by Quinn and Schlenker, it was kind of a 2x2 design. Half of the participants were told they needed to think about the importance of accuracy. Half of the participants were told, think about the importance of cooperation. And then within each of those, half and half were told that they had to explain their reasoning to the group after they made a decision. Half did not have to explain what they thought. And so the way this looks is you have the ones who have to think about accuracy. Well, actually, no. I'm going to ask you a question about this. What do you think? Based on these, which group was most likely to conform and which group was least likely to conform? Okay, so the most likely to conform were the people who were told to think about cooperation and were going to be held accountable. They had to explain their answer. Because if you don't conform, if you don't go along with the group, you're not cooperating. So that was the most likely to conform. The group that was least likely to conform was the group who had to explain their answer, but they were told to think about accuracy. So they're being held accountable for accuracy. If they don't give the right answer, they don't make the right decision because they're conforming, they're not going to be accurate. So how do you justify your lack of accuracy? You can't. And so they were most likely to be independent, to not conform, because they had to justify and explain how their answer was accurate. So accountability, it depends. If you're focused on cooperation, being held accountable makes you more likely to conform. But if it's something like accuracy, less likely to conform. For self-esteem and security, people with low self-esteem are more likely to conform. If you feel secure in your ability, you're less likely to. So people with higher self-esteem don't conform as much. Another factor that matters is how secure you feel in your group. If you have less security, you are more likely to conform. So that is a negative correlation. And an experiment on this was done by Ditz and Kelly. And they had college guys who were recruited to join a prestigious group, one they really wanted to join. And they were told that they could remove any member of the group at any time in the interest of group efficiency. Then they would have a discussion and they rated every member's value to the group. The participants were given fake results of those ratings. So half were told that they were well liked and accepted, and then half were told that they were not really popular for the group. So this was to falsely lower their sense of security or raise it. The people who thought that they weren't popular conformed more in future discussions and on perceptual tests like that line test that Ash did. So because they felt, oh no, I'm not secure, they might kick me out of this group, it increased their conformity. Another factor is age, and there's an age range where you have your highest conformity. So the age range is 10 to 25. If you are below 10, you're just kind of oblivious. If you're above 25, you don't care as much what people think, you're less likely to conform. So there's a couple of experiments connected with this. For Steinberg, what they did was they had young adults as the participants, and they were told about behaviors that could either be seen as risky or as exciting. So is this dangerous or is this exciting? If they were with their peers, they were significantly more likely to say the behaviors were exciting, not dangerous. And just a real life example, there's 3 times more car accidents for teen drivers if there is another teen in the car. They're more likely to conform to the idea of, go have fun, take the risks, it's exciting. And then for Bard, what that experiment was they had a popular girl who talked about how swimming in the ocean after a shark attack or after a shark was spotted in the area would be a really exciting adventure. Even if other girls all privately said that was a horrible idea, they would start to agree with her in the group discussion. Because she was popular, that also goes back to that prestige, they were more likely to conform, and especially because of their age range. They were adolescents. Then finally, the nature of the group matters. You can think of, there's 3 factors connected with this. Groups are most effective in getting people to conform if, 1, there are perceived experts in the group. Like, why wouldn't you go along with an expert? So perceived experts. The members of the group have a high social status. Remember, we like that. So lots of social status in the group. And then 3, the members are homogenous. They're alike in some way. So, for example, in Ash's study, if 3 Confederates were all white men, like the participant, he was more likely to conform compared to when there was at least 1 Confederate who was a person of color. So if everyone looked like the actual participant, then they were significantly more likely to conform. So one way to reduce groupthink, because that's conformity with groups too, is to have diverse groups rather than homogeneous ones. And so this connects with reference group. Reference groups are the groups that you belong to and you identify with. When you change your reference group, you are going to change your attitudes and behaviors to match that new reference group. You are going to conform to the people you think are in your reference group. And so an experiment that Crendel did was with sororities and body image. There were 2 sororities who had different ideas on what the ideal body type was and what acceptable behavior you could do to get there. So was it acceptable to binge and purge? Should you be a healthy eater? Basically, one sorority encouraged eating disorders, one did not. Girls were more popular if they were more closely conformed to that ideal look and to the ideal behavior of their sorority. So the girls in the sorority where the ideal was a thinner body, even if it came with disordered eating, more of the women in that sorority had thinner bodies, had disordered eating. And so question for you, what is, out of all of these 7, can you think of another example of conformity because of one of these factors? Okay, next thing we are going to talk about is social norms. Social norms can be descriptive or injunctive. If they're descriptive, it reflects our knowledge about what most people do in a given situation. If it's injunctive, it specifies what you should do. This is often with explicit instructions or directives, things like signs. So if it's descriptive, it's a little more implicit, not explicit. An injunctive one would be if there was a sign saying don't walk on the grass. Descriptive is you just know people don't tend to walk on the grass here, but there's no sign about it. So institutions often like to make norms that are descriptive. They don't have signs, but they just expect everyone to follow with what they should do. Have that more implied, implicit element to it. A few experiments connected with this. One that Aronson did for this was done at UCLA, I believe, and it was when there was a drought in California. At the time, only 6% of college students were conforming to a request to take shorter showers during the drought. So that was an injunctive. The school said, please take short showers. Only 6% were doing it. What Aronson did for this study is he had a Confederate who started a shower at the end of a room in the athletic center. And as soon as someone came in, that Confederate would turn off the shower and, like loudly lather up. So it was obvious the Confederate was turning off the shower to conserve water as he was lathering up. And then he would turn it on again to rinse off and then quickly turn it off again and leave without even looking at that other person, the unwitting participant in the room. When that happened, 49% of students turned off the water when they showered and they were lathering up. So it went from 6% conserving water to 49% who were conserving just because they heard someone else in another shower stall conserving water. If they did the experiment, but there were two Confederates in two stalls who did the turn off the water to lather up thing, then it went all the way to 67% who were conforming, who turned off the water. You tend to conform to what you assume most people are doing. For Cialdini's experiment, he put flyers on cars in a parking lot of a library. And so the participants were the people who were coming out of the library and going to their cars. Half of the people who left the library to go to their cars saw someone pick up a fast food bag and throw it away as the participants were walking to their cars. Half just had someone walk by them in the parking lot. That was the control group. 37% of the control group picked up the flyer from their car and threw it on the ground. Only 7% of the people in the experimental group who saw that person throw away the fast food bag took the flyer from their car and threw it on the ground. So it decreased littering from 37% down to 7% because of seeing someone else not litter actually pick up trash. In another version of this experiment, they didn't see anyone else in the parking lot, but the parking lot was set up one of three ways. A third of the time, it was a totally clean parking lot. A third of the time, there was one piece of paper, one flyer on the ground. And then a third of the time, it was littered with flyers. So my question for you is, in which of those scenarios were people least likely to litter? Most likely to take the flyer off of their car and take it with them versus throwing it in the or on the ground. So it is the group that saw one piece of paper on the ground. The group that saw absolutely no paper on the ground, it was a totally clean parking lot. they weren't primed at all. There was no descriptive social norm there because there was nothing to remind them, hey, this is what most people are doing, this is what most people aren't doing. For the groups that had the one piece of paper and a totally messy parking lot, they had descriptive social norms. They had an idea of what the normal person was doing. When there was one piece of paper on the ground, only one flyer, that was a sign that most people were not throwing it on the ground, so they didn't throw it on the ground either. When it was covered in flyers, that's a sign this is what everyone's doing, and so that's what everyone wanted to do as well. And then finally, for Kaiser's experiment, they had a large envelope hanging from a public mailbox with a €5 note that was visible in the address window. And what they wanted to see was how many people stole the letter. But again, they kind of had to set up a descriptive social norm. So half of the time there was graffiti and litter around the mailbox. And then half of the time it was clean around the mailbox. If there was a lot of litter, 27% stole the money, stole the envelope with the money. If it was clean, only 13% stole the envelope. So 27 down to 13 just by having it look clean around them. And I will stop there for today. We have just a few more things to cover in the last video, but that will be it for this video.